Portland Trailblazers finished 21 and 61 last year. But I think the most indicative stat that tells you how bad it is in Portland is that they lost 15 of their last 17. And if that wasn't bad enough, this is a trend that they've done for a few years now, where they just tank the second half of the season in crazy, ridiculous fashion. And that's not healthy. That's not good. Spoiler, it's going to happen again this year. But I think we do need to talk about this team because the West is very loaded, very deep. So no way in hell these guys get into the play-in. But 15 seeds and 14 seeds are a lot better than they used to be. I mean, I look at the roster. You've got DeAndre Ayton. You've got Anthony Simons. You've got Denny Avdia, who you got in that trade for Malcolm Brogdon. And I didn't love that trade for Portland. Like, you're giving up a lot just for Avdia, who couldn't really make it in Washington. He became like a solid defender. He is young, but whatever. He's at least a solid player, I suppose. You've got Simons, Ayton. You've got Jeremy Grant is still there. Matisse Thybulle. Like, you've got talent, and normally you wouldn't see that sort of playable talent on a bottom feeding team. You just wouldn't. To say nothing of like the young guys, and there are promising young guys on the roster. Simons, as I mentioned, young guy but still contributes at a high level. You've got Shaden Sharp, who's sort of coming into his own. You drafted Scoot Henderson last year, who did not have a very good year, actually had a really bad year, but does have potential, and I'd like to think he can bounce back this year, but probably needs to play off the bench, needs to play G League minutes. So if he can develop, that's another super valuable piece. Let's see, who almost am I missing? You've got Robert Williams, who never stays healthy and missed all of last year, but if he's healthy, he can play. So like I have to kind of wonder for Portland, like conceptually they have pieces to compete, but it's not enough to compete. The bench is like not good. They have way too many centers. I didn't even mention their draft pick Donovan Clingan or Duop Reith, who had a great year last year. Like too many centers, too many guards between Simons and Sharp and Henderson. And oh, by the way, they have Devonte Graham now, so a bunch of undersized, non-defensive guards just littering the roster. Matisse Thybulle, like he's not a guard, he's a forward, but he's like not a. It doesn't make sense for him to be on the roster unless you're trying to win. And I just don't think this team is going to win. I'm also of the mind that Chauncey Billups should be fired. And the Portland Trailblazers. I looked up this stat because I couldn't believe it. They were 4-41 in clutch games last year, which is unheard of. Also, opponents shot 61-ish% in the paint against the Trailblazers, which is the highest percentage ever since the stat got tracked, which is I think 1996, I want to say. But yeah, Phillips is just a bad coach. He was there really because Dame wanted him, and now that Dame's not there, Phillips has shown he's not a good coach. They need a good coach. They need to figure out what they're doing with the guard for because all three of their guys are young. You can't really play the three of them together because that would be such a size issue and a defensive issue. You also have to figure out the center thing. Those guys aren't really fours, and you already have a four in Jeremy Grant. So, speaking of Jeremy Grant, good, solid player. He plays really for stats and money. He's not a guy who is going to help you win games. So, if I'm Portland, I'm trying to get off of his contract, the contract that you signed him to that you shouldn't have, but I'm trying to move him. I'm trying to move Aiton. I'm trying to move these vets, and I'm trying to get young and figure out which two of the three guards. Because I think if you keep two of Sharp, Simons, Henderson, you're good. If you keep a third, it gets kind of iffy for the reasons I mentioned before. And you just try and go that direction and hope that that leads you eventually to a title within the next decade. So I don't know what timeline is going to look like because again, there's a lot to not like here. As far as I don't love too much of the rest of the depth. Those young guys I mentioned before are really the only young guys I think have any potential. And Henderson, you have to be concerned after last year. So I don't know, like how many years is it going to take for them to be in the playoffs? Two, three? Like that's not great. And the West just keeps getting better and better and deeper. So good luck dealing with that mess. Um, in the meantime, they are a 14th or 15th seed that maybe they surprise me. Maybe they get into that 11, 12 range, but I just don't see it. It's just too much of a mess. Needs to be dealt with, and hopefully it is dealt with soon.